The date is September 09 AD. Imagine standing on the edge of a vast, ancient forest in Germania. The air is cool and crisp, carrying the scent of pine needles and damp earth. The sun is filtering through the canopy in golden shafts, illuminating a landscape that feels wild, untamed, and beautiful. But beneath this beauty, history is about to change forever. This is the story of the Battle of the Teutoburg Forest, a moment that tested an empire and taught the world a lesson about humility that still echoes today. We begin with a man named Publius Quinctilius Varus. He is the governor of Germania, a man accustomed to the comforts of Rome and the structured life of a lawyer and administrator. Varus isn't a natural soldier, not like the rough generals who usually lead Rome's armies. He believes in law, order, and the unstoppable power of the Roman civilization. Walking beside him is his guide, a young man named Arminius. Arminius is fascinating. He is the son of a Germanic chief, but he was raised in Rome. He wears a Roman uniform, speaks perfect Latin, and is a trusted friend of the empire. He is the bridge between two worlds. To Varus, Arminius represents the future of Germania that accepts Roman rule with open arms. The trust between them is absolute, which makes what happens next so incredibly hard to believe. Varus commands 3 massive legions, the 17th, 18th, and 19th. This isn't just a small group of soldiers. We are talking about nearly 20,000 people. Imagine a column stretching for miles, a moving city of iron and leather. They are accompanied by wagons full of supplies, furniture, and even families, because Varus treats this territory as mostly safe. They are not marching to war with tight formations and weapons ready. They are marching to their winter quarters, relaxed and confident. The sounds of the march are rhythmic and peaceful, the clanking of armor, the low rumble of wagon wheels, and the cheerful chatter of men who believe they are the masters of the world. They carry the shining golden eagles, the standards of their legions, symbols that make them feel invincible. As they move deeper into the forest, the atmosphere begins to shift. The friendly, open roads give way to narrow, winding tracks squeezed between towering trees and dense thickets. The sky above seems to disappear as the branches weave together, blocking out the sun. It gets darker, quieter, and colder. The air becomes heavy, pressing down on the soldiers. This is the problem. The terrain is perfectly designed for an ambush, yet they walk right into it. Arminius brings news of a minor uprising ahead. He suggests a shortcut through the Teutoburg Forest to deal with it quickly. It seems like a logical, smart decision. Varus trusts him. He trusts the plan. But in the shadows of the trees, thousands of Germanic warriors are waiting, silent and patient. They know the Romans are coming. They have been waiting for this exact moment. Then the sky opens up. A torrential autumn storm unleashes its fury. Rain hammers down in sheets, turning the dirt path into a thick, churning river of mud. The wagons, heavy with supplies, sink into the mire up to their axles. The soldiers slip and slide, their boots getting stuck, their heavy shields becoming burdens instead of protection. The wind howls through the trees, drowning out the sounds of the horns. The beautiful, orderly column dissolves into a chaotic mess. Men are struggling just to walk, let alone fight. And then the first wave hits. It doesn't come as a full army charge, but as a series of terrifying hit-and-run attacks. Spears fly out from the dense underbrush, striking men who can't even see where the attack is coming from. The Roman soldiers are trained to fight in open fields, shoulder to shoulder, moving like a machine. Here, among the trees and ravines, they cannot form their lines. They cannot see their officers. They cannot see the enemy. They can only hear the shouting of the Germanic tribes and the thud of weapons striking shields. The confusion is absolute. The fear is palpable. You can feel the panic rising as the reality sets in. This isn't a minor rebellion. This is a trap. Their guide, Arminius, has vanished. He has slipped away into the woods to join his people, leaving Varus and the legions alone in the dark, wet forest, surrounded by an enemy they cannot see but can feel closing in. For 3 long days, this struggle continues. It is a battle of survival against both the elements and the unseen enemy. The Romans tried to build defensive camps at night, hammering stakes into the soaking ground while arrows rain down on them. They are exhausted, hungry, and running out of food. Their morale, once so high, is crumbling with every step. Every time they try to break out, the path is blocked by fallen logs or earth walls built by the tribes. They are being herded, pushed deeper into the swampy, deadly maze of the forest. The sensory experience is overwhelming, the smell of rain and sweat, the screams of the wounded, the constant, unsettling noise of the storm. It is a far cry from the glorious victories Rome is used to. This is messy, personal, and desperate. By the third day, the situation is critical. The legions are no longer an army. They are a terrified group of individuals fighting for their lives in the mud. Varus realizes the terrible truth. There will be no rescue. There will be no miraculous breakthrough. He sees his beloved legions destroyed. In a moment of profound despair and tragic honor, Varus decides to fall on his own sword. He cannot bear the shame of losing Rome's armies. When his soldiers find him, it is the final blow to their spirits. With their leader gone and the path blocked, the remaining officers make a heartbreaking choice. They know they cannot win. They attempt a final desperate charge, not to victory, but to try and save the eagles, their sacred standards. In the end, the forest swallows them whole. The screens fade, the rain washes away the blood, and silence returns to Teutoburg. 3 entire legions, nearly 20,000 people, are lost. It's a catastrophe unlike anything Rome has ever experienced. The news travels slowly back to the capital, crossing the Alps and entering the palace of Emperor Augustus. When he hears the news, his heartbroken words echo through history. "Varus, give me back my legions." He is said to have banged his head against the walls of his palace, overcome with grief for the men and the failure. The golden eagles, the sacred standards of the legions, are gone. The borders of the empire are shattered. Rome stops expanding. The Rhine River becomes the permanent line, a scar that marks the limit of their power. But why do we tell this story today? Why look back at such a sad event? We tell it because it reminds us of the strength of the human spirit, even in defeat. The soldiers in that forest faced impossible odds with courage. They fought until the very end, loyal to each other and their ideals. And for the Germanic people, it was a moment where they stood up for their freedom and their land, proving that even the biggest giants can fall. This battle teaches us that no matter how powerful or prepared we think we are, we must always respect the unknown. It teaches us about the importance of trust and the devastating cost of its betrayal. Most importantly, it teaches us resilience. Rome survived this blow. It learned, it adapted, and it continued. The memory of those lost in the trees lived on, shaping the future of Europe forever. It is a story of tragedy, yes, but also a story of enduring legacy and the lessons history leaves for us to find. Imagine the forest as a living, breathing entity. As the rain continues to fall in sheets, the trees seem to lean in closer, watching the Roman army struggle. The date is September 09 AD, but the atmosphere has shifted completely from the orderly march we pictured earlier. Now, it's a fight for survival. The narrow path, barely wide enough for a few wagons, has become a trap. The mud is not just dirt. It's a greedy, clinging force that pulls at the soldiers' boots, stealing their energy with every step. The sensory experience is overwhelming. You can hear the slap of wet sandals against the ground, the groaning of wood as wagons tip over, and the distant, thundering sound of the storm mixing with the terrifying war cries of the Germanic tribes. The real struggle begins with the realization that their training has failed them. These are the 17th, 18th, and 19th legions, the pride of Rome. They're used to fighting in open fields where they can see their enemy, where they can lock their shields together and form an impenetrable wall. But here, among the ancient oaks and beeches of the Teutoburg Forest, they can't form lines. The trees are too thick, the underbrush too dense. They're fighting in small, confused groups. One moment, a soldier is walking alongside his best friend, maybe sharing a joke about the awful weather, and the next, a spear flies silently from the shadows, striking with deadly precision. The enemy isn't a faceless mass of armor. They are shadows. They strike and vanish, moving like ghosts through the branches. The first day ends in a chaotic scramble to survive. As darkness falls, the Romans try to build a defensive camp. It's a heartbreaking scene to imagine. Men who are exhausted, starving and shivering from the cold rain, are forced to pick up shovels and axes. They have to dig trenches and build walls in the mud, all while being harassed by projectiles from the dark forest. They can't see who is attacking them. They can only hear the whistling of spears and the shouts of the tribesmen. The emotional toll is crushing. They're far from home, wet, cold, and afraid. They look to their commanders for guidance, but even the officers seem unsure. The discipline that held them together for so long is starting to fracture, like a mirror cracking under pressure. When the sun rises on the second day, the storm has not stopped. If anything, the sky is a darker, angrier gray. Varus, the governor who trusted the wrong man, tries to rally his men. He knows they cannot stay in the forest. They have to break out and reach the safety of the open ground or the Roman forts near the Rhine. He orders the army to move forward, abandoning their heavy baggage to make speed. This is a desperate move. Imagine the sight of magnificent wagons filled with personal treasures and supplies being left behind or burned. It's a visual sign that things are going terribly wrong. The soldiers are forced to leave behind the comforts of home, trudging through the deep mud with nothing but their weapons and their wet wool cloaks. The Germanic tribes, led by the traitor Arminius, are ready for this move. They haven't just been attacking randomly. They've been hurting the Romans. As the legions try to push forward, they find their path blocked. The tribes have built a massive wall of earth and timber across the track. They've cleared the trees in front of it to create a killing zone. The Romans are funneled into a narrow gap where their numbers mean nothing. 20,000 men are stuck in a bottleneck. The front line cannot advance, and the back line can't see what's happening. It is a claustrophobic nightmare. The air smells of wet wood, sweat, and the metallic tang of fear. The Roman javelins, designed to pierce armor from a distance, are useless in the close quarters fighting. The Germanic warriors have shorter spears and lighter shields, perfect for fighting in the thickets. They slash at the legs of the Romans, pulling them down into the mud. For these soldiers, the world has shrunk to the man in front of them and the unseen enemy in the trees. The sounds are a constant symphony of chaos, the clash of steel, the splintering of wooden shields, the screams of the wounded. There's no grand strategy here, only moment-to-moment survival. A Roman soldier might swing his short sword, the gladius, but the confined space makes it awkward. He tries to protect himself with his large, curved shield, the scutum, but a spear thrusts out from his side, finding a gap in his armor. The morale is plummeting. They see their friends fall, their commanders look lost, and their path forward is a wall of death. The unity of the legion is gone. Now it's every man for himself. The tribesmen, fighting on their home turf, are energized. They know every tree, every hiding spot. They are fighting for their homes, their families, their freedom. For them, this isn't just a battle. It's an extermination. The third day brings the final, tragic conclusion. The Roman column, now a fragmented and bleeding line of survivors, is pushed into one last desperate stand. Many of the high-ranking officers, including Varus himself, realize the situation is hopeless. Rather than face the humiliation of capture, they fall on their own swords. It's a final, terrible act of Roman honor. With their leadership gone, the last vestiges of order collapse. The remaining soldiers are hunted down, group by group. The forest, which had been a witness, now becomes a tomb. The tribes show little mercy. The battle turns into a massacre. Some soldiers are captured, only to be sacrificed in sacred groves to the Germanic gods. Others are simply cut down where they stand. The rain, which has been their constant companion for 3 days, finally begins to wash away the evidence of the slaughter, but the memory will endure for millennia. This battle didn't just end a campaign. It created a psychological border in the Roman mind. The forests of Germania became a place of nightmares, a land that had devoured 3 of their finest legions. For generations, the name Teutoburg would be spoken with a shudder. The lost eagles became a symbol of national shame, and future emperors would send expedition after expedition to recover them, to try and heal this deep wound in the Roman psyche. They eventually recovered the eagles, but they never truly recovered from the loss. The dream of conquering the lands beyond the Rhine died in that muddy, blood-soaked forest. So the story of Teutoburg is not just about a battle. It's about how a single event can change the course of history. It's a powerful reminder of how overconfidence can lead to disaster, how betrayal can shatter even the mightiest of empires, and how the fight for freedom can inspire people to achieve the impossible. It's a human story filled with courage, fear, tragedy, and a legacy that continues to teach us profound lessons about our world. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more journeys into the past. We'll see you in the next one. Throughout the second day, the struggle becomes a test of individual courage rather than military strength. We often think of Roman soldiers as robots in red armor, but they were human beings. They had families back in Rome, mothers and fathers who would never see them again. They were scared. In the heat of the battle, small acts of heroism happen. Soldiers try to shield their friends with their own bodies. Medics rush into the line of fire to drag the wounded to cover. But the situation is impossible. They are running out of food. Their water is spoiled. They are wet to the bone. The forest feels like it is closing in on them, suffocating them. Every time they try to break through the enemy wall, they are pushed back by a tide of fierce warriors fighting to protect their land. By the time the third day arrives, the hope is almost gone. The once great Roman column is a shadow of its former self. The men are hollow-eyed, stumbling through the mud like sleepwalkers. The numbers have thinned drastically. The constant attacks have worn down their physical strength and their mental resolve. They are no longer fighting for victory. They are fighting for the chance to die quickly. The rain has finally stopped, but the mist is thick, swirling around the trees like a shroud. It is quiet, which is perhaps the most terrifying thing of all. They can hear the crows circling overhead, waiting. The forest has won. This brings us to the heartbreaking solution. It is not a victory, and it is not an escape. For Varus, the solution is the ultimate act of taking responsibility. He realizes that he has led these men to their doom. He realizes that the eagles, the sacred symbols of the legions, are about to be captured by the enemy. In a small clearing near the Kalkriese pass, Varus makes his choice. He falls upon his own sword. It is a tragic Roman end. He dies not as a governor, but as a soldier who refuses to be paraded through the streets of a foreign city as a trophy. His death is a mercy to himself, but a crushing blow to the remaining men. When their commander falls, the last bit of order holding the army together evaporates. But even in this darkest moment, we see the spark of true loyalty and courage. The primary standard bearer of the 17th Legion, seeing that all is lost, makes a difficult decision. He knows that if the eagle is captured, the shame will haunt Rome forever. With tears in his eyes, he shouts a final salute to his fallen comrades and hurls the golden standard deep into a peat bog. He sacrifices his own chance at surrender to save the honor of his legion. Other officers follow suit. They don't want to survive if it means living with this shame. They choose to die fighting. The remaining soldiers form a small, tight knot. They don't run away. They charge into the mass of the enemy. It is a final, suicidal act of defiance. They go down fighting, back to back, buying time for a few horsemen to escape and carry the news back to Rome. It is a terrible end, but there is a certain beauty in their refusal to give up. The silence that follows is heavy. The forest absorbs the sounds of battle until only the wind remains. Thousands of men lie where they fell, their bodies covered by the falling leaves. The Teutoburg Forest becomes a tomb. The struggle is over, but the impact of this day is just beginning to ripple through history. This brings us to the lesson, the lasting impact of this tragedy that echoes across 2,000 years. The news reaches Rome weeks later, traveling slowly across the Alps. Imagine the scene in the palace of Emperor Augustus. He is an old man now, the man who turned Rome from a republic into an empire. When he hears that Varus is dead and 3 legions have been wiped out, he is devastated. He doesn't get angry. He falls into a deep despair. Historical accounts tell us that he would walk through the halls of his palace at night, banging his head against the walls and shouting, "Quinctilius Varus, give me back my legions." It is a cry of pure grief. It shows us that even the most powerful people in the world are not immune to heartbreak. The immediate aftermath is a shift in the map of the world. Rome never attempts to conquer Germania east of the Rhine River again. The battle marks the border between the Latin world and the Germanic world. It stops the expansion of the empire in that direction permanently. The Rhine becomes a wall, both physical and cultural. If the Romans had won that day, the history of Europe, and perhaps the world, would be completely different. The languages we speak, the laws we follow, the borders of modern nations, they all trace their roots back to this muddy moment in the forest. But the lesson here goes deeper than just borders and maps. The Battle of the Teutoburg Forest teaches us about the dangers of arrogance. Varus believed that because he was wrong, he was automatically superior. He believed that he could civilize the wild with paperwork and parades. He underestimated his opponent. He didn't respect the environment or the people who lived there. It is a timeless reminder that no matter how strong or successful we become, we must never become too proud to learn. We must never assume we have all the answers. Nature is unpredictable, and the human spirit, when fighting for freedom, is an incredibly powerful force. There is also a lesson in resilience, both for the losers and the winners. For the Germanic tribes, this victory was a moment of unity. It proved that they could stand up to a giant. It preserved their culture and their way of life. For Rome, the defeat was a wound, but it was not fatal. Rome did not collapse because of this battle. Instead, it learned. It adapted. It became more careful. The emperors who followed Augustus were more humble, more cautious. The empire endured for another 400 years. This shows us that failure is not the end. We can lose battles, we can make terrible mistakes, but we can still recover and move forward. Have you ever heard of a battle so devastating, so utterly catastrophic, that it haunted an emperor to his dying day? A battle that stopped the world's greatest empire dead in its tracks and redrew the map of Europe forever. This is the story of the Battle of the Teutoburg Forest, a tale of betrayal, ambition, and a ghost that haunted Rome for centuries. Our story begins in the year 09 AD. The Roman Empire is at the zenith of its power, ruled by the legendary Augustus. For decades, Roman legions had been pushing east of the Rhine River, deep into the wild, untamed lands of Germania. They built forts, roads, and collected taxes, slowly but surely turning these fierce tribal lands into another Roman province. It seemed like nothing could stop the unstoppable march of the Roman eagle. Commanding the Roman forces in Germania was a man named Publius Quinctilius Varus. Varus wasn't a military genius, but he was an experienced administrator, a nobleman, and a trusted relative of the emperor. He had successfully governed other provinces, and Germania was supposed to be his next success story. He saw the local tribes as mostly pacified, a people ready to be brought into the fold of Roman civilization. He was confident, perhaps a little too confident. And this is where our second key player enters the scene, Arminius. To Varus and the Romans, Arminius was a trusted ally. He was the son of a prominent Germanic chieftain, raised in Rome as a noble hostage. He had learned Latin, served in the Roman army, earned Roman citizenship, and even achieved the rank of equestrian, a knight. Varus saw him as the perfect bridge between Roman rule and the Germanic people. He considered Arminius a friend, a confidant, a valuable advisor. But beneath the surface of this Romanized nobleman, the heart of a Germanic warrior beat fiercely. Arminius saw the slow-motion conquest of his homeland. He saw his people's traditions and freedoms being eroded by Roman taxes and laws. While he smiled and dined with Varus, he was secretly forging a grand alliance of Germanic tribes, uniting bitter rivals with a shared hatred for the Roman invaders. He was playing a long, deadly game, and Varus was completely oblivious. As autumn approached in 09 AD, Varus was preparing to march his 3 legions, the 17th, 18th, and 19th, along with auxiliary troops and civilian followers, back to their winter camps near the Rhine. It was a massive column, stretching for miles, encumbered with wagons, families, and supplies. This was supposed to be a routine march through supposedly peaceful territory. Just as they were about to set off, Arminius arrived with urgent news. A minor tribe, he claimed, had rebelled in a remote area to the north. It was a small problem, he assured Varus, but one that needed to be dealt with to maintain Roman authority. He suggested a shortcut through a dense, unfamiliar forest, the Teutoburg Forest, to quickly crush the uprising before heading to winter quarters. Despite warnings from at least one loyal Germanic nobleman that Arminius was a traitor, Varus chose to trust his friend. It was a fatal mistake. He diverted his entire army from the known safe military roads and plunged them deep into the dark, winding, and muddy paths of the Teutoburg. The terrain was a nightmare. A torrential autumn storm had begun, turning the forest floor into a quagmire. Trees pressed in on all sides, the narrow path forcing the disciplined Roman legions to break their tight marching formations. The long column of soldiers and civilians stretched out over an astonishing 15 to 20 kilometers. They were vulnerable, disorganized, and completely blind. And then the trap was sprung. From the high ground, from behind trees, from hidden trenches, the united Germanic tribes, led by Arminius, unleashed hell. Spears and arrows rained down on the trapped Romans. The first surprise attack caused chaos and panic. The Romans, masters of open-field warfare, were helpless in the dense, claustrophobic woods. They couldn't form their famous testudo shield wall. They couldn't execute their disciplined maneuvers. They were simply a long line of targets. The battle wasn't a single event. It was a running, 3-day massacre. Varus and his officers struggled to maintain control. They would try to form a defensive line, only to be ambushed again a few miles down the path. They managed to set up a makeshift camp on the first night, burning their heavy wagons to try and move faster, but it was no use. The attacks were relentless. The Germans knew every inch of this forest, while the Romans were utterly lost. The legionaries fought with the desperate courage you'd expect from Roman soldiers, but their situation was hopeless. They were outnumbered, surrounded, and fighting in an environment that was their enemy's greatest ally. Morale plummeted. Varus, seeing that all was lost and unwilling to face the humiliation of capture, fell on his own sword, following a grim Roman tradition for defeated commanders. Many of his senior officers did the same. Without leadership, the remaining pockets of Roman soldiers were hunted down and annihilated. Over 3 days, more than 20,000 Roman soldiers, along with thousands of camp followers, were killed. It was a complete and total annihilation. The 17th, 18th, and 19th legions ceased to exist. Their revered legionary eagles, the golden standards that embodied the honor and spirit of each legion, were captured by the tribes, the ultimate disgrace for the Roman military. The forest floor was littered with the bodies of Rome's finest, a grim testament to Varus's misplaced trust and Arminius's brilliant, brutal strategy. News of the disaster eventually trickled back to Rome, and it hit the capital like a thunderclap. The empire was in a state of shock and panic. Germania was lost. The border was wide open. There were fears that the triumphant Germanic tribes would now pour across the Rhine and invade Gaul. Emperor Augustus, by now an old man in his 70s, was utterly devastated. The loss was not just military. It was deeply personal. He had known Varus. He had built this army. The historian Suetonius tells us that for months, Augustus would wander the halls of his palace, unshaven and unkempt, beating his head against the walls and crying out, "Quinctilius Varus, give me back my legions." The numbers 17, 18, and 19 were permanently struck from the Roman army's rolls. They would never be used again, forever tainted by the shame of their destruction. The Varian disaster, as it came to be known, marked a crucial turning point. Rome's seemingly endless expansion was halted. The dream of a great Roman province of Germania, stretching all the way to the Elbe River, died in that dark forest. The Rhine River became the permanent fortified frontier of the empire in the north, a boundary that would define Europe for the next 400 years. But Rome does not forget, and it does not forgive. The immediate aftermath saw a new commander dispatched to the frontier, Tiberius, Augustus's stepson and future emperor. He secured the Rhine, preventing any invasion of Gaul. A few years later, a brilliant young general named Germanicus, a man whose very name meant conqueror of Germany, launched a series of massive punitive campaigns back into Germania. Germanicus's mission was one of vengeance and recovery. He led his legions deep into the lands east of the Rhine, seeking out the tribes that had participated in the massacre. In the year 15 AD, 6 years after the battle, his army reached the site of the slaughter in the Teutoburg Forest. The Roman historian Tacitus gives us a chilling account of what they found. It was a ghastly scene. The bones of men and horses lay whitening in the sun. Skulls were nailed to trees. In sacred groves nearby, they found crude altars where captured Roman tribunes and centurions had been sacrificed to Germanic gods. The soldiers, many of whom had friends and relatives who died there, walked through the ghostly remains of their fallen comrades. It was a deeply emotional and sobering moment. They gathered the bones and buried them in a large mound, a final tribute to the lost legions. During these campaigns, Germanicus's legions managed to achieve a measure of revenge. They fought and defeated Arminius in several major battles, proving that on open ground, Roman discipline was still superior. More importantly for Roman honor, they managed to recover 2 of the 3 lost legionary eagles. The recovery of these sacred standards was a huge morale boost and a symbolic victory. The 3rd and final eagle would be recovered decades later, in 41 AD, finally closing the book on that particular chapter of dishonor. As for the main players, Arminius, the victor of Teutoburg, was never able to permanently unite the Germanic tribes. His ambition and power made other chieftains jealous and fearful. He was eventually assassinated in 21 AD, not by a Roman sword, but by the daggers of his own countrymen. Germanicus the Avenger was recalled to Rome by a jealous emperor Tiberius and died soon after under mysterious circumstances. The Battle of the Teutoburg Forest remains one of the most significant and decisive battles in world history. It was a brutal lesson in the dangers of arrogance and the importance of terrain, intelligence, and cultural understanding. It set the boundaries of the Roman world, and in doing so, shaped the future of Germany and of Europe itself. It's a story that reminds us that even the mightiest empires can be humbled, and that sometimes the fate of the world can be decided in a dark, forgotten forest. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button, subscribe for more epic tales from history, and let me know in the comments what historical event you'd like to see covered next. Until next time, stay curious. However, despite the recovery and the revenge raids, the strategic reality had changed forever. Emperor Tiberius, who succeeded Augustus, made a wise and difficult decision. He looked at the map, looked at the fierce resistance of the Germanic tribes, and looked at the cost of holding that wild land. He decided that Rome would not try to conquer Germania east of the Rhine again. This was a huge moment. It stopped the expansion of Rome in its tracks. The border of the empire was set. The Rhine River became a permanent wall, dividing the Roman world of stone cities and written laws from the Germanic world of tribes and forests. This decision shaped the future of Europe in ways we still live with today. If Rome had successfully taken Germania, the borders of Europe, the languages we speak, and the cultures we know would be completely different. The battle preserved the independence of the Germanic people. It created a diverse Europe where different cultures lived side by side. It teaches us that sometimes the most important victories are the battles you choose not to fight. Tiberius recognized the limits of his power. He showed that true strength sometimes means knowing when to stop, when to pull back, and when to accept that you cannot control everything. It was a lesson in humility that served the empire well for hundreds of years. Fast forward nearly 2,000 years. The story of the Battle of the Teutoburg Forest faded into legend, a ghost story told about a lost army. People wondered where exactly it happened. Was it deep in the mountains? Near a specific river? It seemed like the secret was lost to time. But history has a way of coming back to us. In the late 20th century, starting around 1987, a British Army officer and an amateur archaeologist named Tony Clun started searching near the village of Kalkriese in Germany. He didn't use shovels at first. He used a metal detector. What he found changed history. He discovered small coins, scattered like breadcrumbs, leading into a narrow passage between a hill and a bog. Then he found lead slingshots, the kind Romans used. Finally, the human remains and the unmistakable traces of a massive conflict. The silence was broken. The AI reconstruction we are visualizing today is based on these very real discoveries. We know the route because we found the coins dropped by fleeing soldiers. We know the location of the final stand because we found the spearheads and the bones. It is an incredible feeling to know that the earth kept this secret for so long, waiting for the right time to give it up. It connects us directly to that moment in 09 AD. We are walking the same ground. So, what is the uplifting message we can take from this tragic and dramatic tale? Why do we remember Varus, Arminius, and the lost legions today? We remember them because their story is a mirror held up to humanity. It shows us the danger of arrogance. Varus underestimated the enemy and the environment, and he paid the price. It is a warning to all of us to stay humble, to prepare for the unexpected, and to never assume we are smarter than nature or other people. Success can blind us if we aren't careful. But the story is also about the incredible resilience of the human spirit. For the Germanic tribes, it was a fight for freedom and identity. For the Romans, it was a lesson in survival and adaptation. Both sides faced incredible hardships, and both sides changed because of it. The pain of that day eventually led to a period of peace along the border. The Romans and the Germans learned to live with each other, trading goods and ideas across the Rhine. Out of the ashes of a terrible battle came a new understanding. We also learn about the power of memory. For 2,000 years, the story of this battle survived. It survived in songs and books and in the whispered warnings of generals. And today, thanks to archaeology and technology, we can revisit that forest and honor those who fell. We can see the faces of the soldiers and the trees that witnessed their fate. It reminds us that history isn't just dead dates and names. It is real people with real feelings, living through extraordinary times. As we leave the Teutoburg Forest in our minds today, let's carry the sunlight of the present with us. We are lucky to live in a world where we can learn from the past without repeating its darkest mistakes. We can appreciate the peace we have and the diverse cultures that make up our world. The forest is quiet now, filled with birds and hikers, but the lesson remains. Be brave, be humble, and never stop learning. The eagles may have fallen, but the spirit of humanity endures, rising stronger from every challenge, just like the sun that finally broke through the storm clouds over the ancient trees.